from Romans chapter 13, verses 8 through 12. Owe no one anything except to love one another. For the one who loves another has fulfilled the law. The commandments, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not murder, you shall not steal, you shall not covet, and any other commandments are summed up in this word: love your neighbor as you love yourself. Love does no wrong to a neighbor. Therefore, love is the fulfilling of the law. Besides this, you know what time it is, how it is now the moment for you to awake from sleep. For salvation is nearer to us now than when we became believers. The night is far gone, the day is near. Let us then lay aside the works of darkness and put on the armor of light. May God add God's blessing to our understanding of these stories and words for us today. In the last few Sundays that I've been with you, we've been commiserating, having empathy for the people of Israel, for all the hardships that they've been going through. Being made slaves to the Egyptians, the toils, the tasks, the torture that had been inflicted upon them. We can, if we put ourselves in that position of feeling so alienated from goodness, we might be able to understand perhaps the way that they conceived God in that story that I just read of the Exodus. If you have suffered unjustly at any time in your life, you too may have had feelings of vengeance. You may have been angry. I can say very, very few times I've really felt vengeance towards anyone, simply because I think my parents did a good job of raising me up not to have that. But I certainly have had a lot of anger. When 9/11 happened, I had a lot of anger, as I'm sure most of you did as well. But the question is in our anger, which is natural for us to feel when we have been violated either personally or as a country, what is our response to be? It is easy to retaliate. The harder thing, I think, is not to retaliate. At least not in the sense in which we do to others as they do unto us. And that may be the hardest thing of being a follower of Jesus Christ. We know that that's what Jesus would do. We have no question, because that's what his life was about. But it's much harder for us to put ourselves in that position. A lot of things are understandable to me, which I don't necessarily approve. I can understand the Egyptian or the Israelite people being so, for as many years as they were enslaved and tortured. I can understand how they might feel about their oppressors. I can understand that they might even wish that they died, and would even rejoice when they did die. I have to say that it's been probably a couple months since Osama bin Laden was killed. All right? Been a couple months. While other people I saw on TV were hooping and hollering and rejoicing, I was myself a little more reflective. Was I glad he was caught? Oh yeah. But there was something in the account that disturbed me. Because the report, at least that I heard, is that he was unarmed. We could have taken him alive. We could have maybe found out information. But instead, we killed him right away. A lot of people will say, but Pastor, that's justice. It's getting back at somebody else who did something bad to us. I can't argue with that. That is exactly what it is. And it may even to our human sentiment seem like the right thing to do. But if we listen to the example of Christ, I think we have to wonder about that, don't we? Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Not as they do unto you, but as you would have them do unto you. Love your neighbor as yourself. We even recall him once saying, love even your enemies. Ooh, he makes it hard for us, doesn't he? He makes it real hard at times for us. 10 years after 9/11, I'm probably like you in that I'm wondering, what have we learned from this experience? Where has our nation gone? And are we on the same course? Are we on a different course? Are we on the right course of who we ought to be as a nation? I look back at those moments just after the tragedies. They start showing the tapes and stuff from back then, and a lot of people were helping each other out. People were coming together to help out those who were victimized. I say, that is God's Spirit working among we people. What, though, I also remember, and I haven't heard a lot about this, is that within 4 days after that event, a Muslim in Arizona, and then more in other states as well, were singled out and killed. Those are memories that we easily forget, because we don't want to remember those things. They were totally innocent, but they were Muslim or Arab-looking, and so they were discriminated against, and yes, some even killed. The Patriot Act was enacted, in which, to some people's accounts, my own included, violated our own Constitution. About you have a right to have a fair trial. We put people away in Guantanamo Bay and in Abu Ghraib and other prisons around the world without any chance for a trial. Some are still in Guantanamo Bay today, 10 years later. Is that our values as a people? Is that how we want to respond? Is that who we want to be? We have to ask ourselves these hard questions. I think one of the things that I notice about our society today is that we would rather not ask the hard questions. We'd rather to look forward and say, let's not look back. But we also know from history and from great historians who said, if you don't look back and learn from your mistakes, you're doomed to repeat them. When we look back at those days, we see wonderful things that happened. People coming to each other's aid and a genuine love and caring of Americans for Americans. But we also see some of the prejudice and discrimination and hatred that resulted towards Muslims and Arabs. I happen to have gone to school with some Muslim people. And so I know some Muslims personally. I also know that they are as American and as good as any other person that I've ever met. On the radio this morning, I told you about the story earlier in our prayers, but there's also something else they mentioned, that of those who they've found related to any terrorist attacks on 9/11 and since, in the last 10 years, there have been 186 people who they thought were either planned that or were going to plan other attacks on America. 186. Now, they also mentioned that the Muslim population is around 1 billion. If you consider that, that's a very small minority of persons, given an entire group. And yet, we often categorize a whole group of people, do we not? Is that not what prejudice is categorizing a whole group of people based on what a few people within that group do. One of the things that has disturbed me too is that we have always been a country that stood for the rights not only of our own people but of other people. And in reflecting the last 10 years, it seems to me that we kind of walked away from those values. We keep them in mind, but we say, if it's a question between giving justice to somebody who might be a perpetrator of violence against us, or our safety, we're going to vote for safety. Maybe that's the right value. I personally think it's not. It seems to me that people of faith have always been, in the past and in the present, those who said, let's do what is right. Let's do what is best. Let's let the light that is best within us shine. And the consequences be what they may. And that is the reason we have people who are called saints. Those are the people maybe that are martyred. But we revere most highly of all because they stood for their principle even when it was not necessarily for their advantage. I wonder how far we've strayed as a country from those values. We still honor them, at least with our mouths. But do we by our actions? That's what troubles me. And that's what I think we collectively as Christians, first and foremost, but also as a country, need to reflect on this 10th anniversary. Who are we and who do we want to be? Some have said that our use of torture of prisoners has actually incited more people to join in terrorist acts against us and has increased the ranks of Al-Qaeda and other terrorist groups because they've got something to say, look, the United States tortured these people. They just didn't have them as prisoner and kept them. They didn't even abide by their own laws and rules. Should we allow such actions on our own to encourage those who would be against us? 9/11 was a wake-up call for us, I think. I know that many of my friends and people thought, we're Americans, we're basically good people. And I think we are. I think we're real good people. And I would still say we're the greatest country in the world, personally. Maybe that's a little too much patriotic fervor coming out. But I do think that's the case. But we still have a long way to go, and we're kind of off track in my own mind as I see it. We've kind of gotten away from the things that we know are most honorable and just. And when we do so, isn't it religion that says we need to repent, we need to reevaluate, we need to introspect, see where we've gone wrong so that we don't do it again? So that we can be better than we were. If we look back on our own lives personally, I'm sure that each one of us, anyone past 20, I think we probably all are today here, have had events in our life in which we're not the proudest of. That doesn't make us who we are, though. Who we are is more a reflection of what we want in our life and for the world, of what our ideals are. We have a former vice president that is arguing now in a book that torture is not only okay, but that we should use it more often. Vice President Cheney has just written a book validating the interrogation he calls it, techniques, which I think is double speak myself. But I'd ask any of you to think of the things that we've done to others, and I think I'm a little bit appalled that we haven't said more against such things that we've done. But I'd ask if those same things that we've done to others were done to our troops, done to our boys and girls in service, would we be appalled? Would we want that to happen to our own? And I have to say unreservedly in that case, absolutely not. Absolutely not. And so if we're not willing to abide by the same standard that we would want given to us, then are we not hypocrites? Introspection takes some hard knocks and looking at our own souls and hearts, but it's something we need to do as a faithful people. I wonder, too, who we've become as a nation. It's interesting that there is, I just heard in the last few weeks, that there is a TV show coming on. I haven't seen it yet because it's yet to premiere. But just the title of that TV show repulses me. It is called Revenge. Have you heard that, the commercial, the promos for that? I see a couple of heads nodding, some not. But it's called Revenge. Now, it's nothing about 9/11 to my knowledge. It actually shows a cute young woman, probably in her 20s. Looks like she's just, the girl next door and, who you would imagine to be a very caring and loving soul. But in the promo, she says, this is not about forgiveness. Someone needs to pay. I have to say, after seeing that promo one time, I just said, I will never watch that show. One, because the name Revenge just repulses me, as it's so anti-Christ-like. And secondly, that it seems to advocate a spirit among people that is totally antithetical to the teachings of the one we would call our Savior. The thing that has spun in the back of my mind with regards to this is, what made the TV producers of this show think that anybody would watch it? And I think you know the answer as well as I do, because people will. Because somehow we have an attraction, a fascination with getting even with somebody, with paybacks, with retaliation, with revenge. And where have we become if that becomes our ethos as a society? What have we become? How far have we strayed? If you look at Jesus' life, we have him depicted on every window in this church. If you look at his life, was he one who was for retaliation and payback and vengeance? Or was he one who emphasized and practiced forgiveness and peaceableness and loving one another? Any one of you could say, but Pastor, that's not the way the world works. And I agree with you 100%. But in my mind, I think, isn't that a shame? Isn't that a shame? If it doesn't work that way, then doesn't that give us all more resolve to help show an example of that way? I've had some bitter enemies in my life, some that I was never able to turn around. A few instances in which I was. In each instance, I've tried, not always succeeded in it, but I've at least tried to take the course of loving them the best way I can. I have to admit I couldn't. I always do that. But I tried my utmost to show I'm not such a bad guy after all. You're making a wrong impression of me if you think I'm really, a bad person. Some would listen, some would not. I'm thankful for those who did. And I kind of feel like a failure for those who I wasn't able to convince. But the one thing that has held true in my spirit all this time is that I want to keep the same path. The path of the one who is on our windows. And I recognize I may fail horribly with it. But the great thing about the good news is not that by believing and doing what Jesus would do, are we going to change the world. There's no guarantee of that. It's simply that you're doing the right thing for the right reasons. And that is the good news. Because we don't have to be responsible for the consequences. We'll let God take care of those. If we simply have an example of loving kindness and peaceableness towards all peoples, friends as well as enemies, then that, maybe, is the best that we can possibly do, and all that God really asks of us. God doesn't ask us to change the world. God asks us to be loving towards one another. And as hard as that is, it's a lot less hard than having to be successful in changing somebody else's heart. I pray that for us as Christians, and for us as United States citizens, that we will look into our own hearts and souls. Ask ourselves individually and also as a country, what path are we on right now? And what path do we need to be on? I hope that you will come to the conclusion that at least the path that we need to be on is the path of this one that we worship as our Christ. Is the one who taught us how to love one another as we love ourselves. God bless us in the struggle to do that, because it will be a perpetual struggle. But it is one in which reminds us of our own intrinsic worth as well as that of our neighbor and even our enemy. God help us.